Hello, welcome back to another evening of shared stories and adventures. Tonight, we're diving into some of the most absolutely mental Stranger Things Season 5 theories the internet has cooked up. I'm talking about the ones that make you question whether people actually watch the same show or if they've been spending too much time in the upside down themselves. We've got theories about clones, theories about time travel, theories that have been officially debunked by the Duffer Brothers, and yet somehow persist like a particularly stubborn demogorgon. There's definitely more sensible theories out there, but where's the fun in that? So tonight, we're focusing on the dumb ones, the wild ones, the ones that make you go, wait, what? If you like what I do here and want a way to support the channel, consider subscribing down below. But for now, grab your Eggo waffles, get comfortable on the couch, and let's begin. So way before Season 5 even got announced, and honestly, since Season 1, one theory has persisted like a particularly annoying demogorgon. The idea is this: the entire show, all of Stranger Things, is actually just an elaborate Dungeons and Dragons campaign, being played by the adult versions of Mike, Will, Dustin, and Lucas. They're sitting around a table somewhere in their 30s or 40s, fantasizing about their imagined childhood nightmares, rolling dice and making up stories about monsters and government conspiracies and a girl with superpowers. Now I can see why people latched onto this. The show is absolutely packed with D&D references. The kids play the game constantly. They name the monsters after D&D creatures. The Demogorgon, the Mind Flayer, Vecna himself. It's all pulled straight from the game. And there's this sort of meta quality to how the show uses these references, like it's winking at the audience. So fans started thinking, what if the wink is actually the whole point? What if this is all just a game? The theory got really popular online. Reddit threads, TikTok videos, whole YouTube essays dedicated to proving that the Duffer Brothers were building toward this massive reveal. People were analysing every D&D scene, looking for clues that would confirm the gang was actually just playing an incredibly detailed campaign. Some versions of the theory suggested it would be revealed in the final episode, with the camera pulling back to show the adult characters sitting around a table, putting down their dice, maybe getting a bit emotional about finishing their long-running game. Here's the thing though, this would be an absolutely terrible ending. It's the equivalent of, it was all a dream, which is basically the laziest, most unsatisfying narrative cop-out you can possibly do. You're essentially telling your audience that nothing they watched mattered. None of the emotional investment, none of the stakes, none of the character development. It was all just imaginary within an already imaginary story. It's narratively bankrupt, peak lazy writing, no notes. Thankfully, the Duffer Brothers have actually addressed this theory directly and shut it down completely. In a red carpet interview with Metro at the premiere of the stage play Stranger Things, "The first shadow," Ross Duffer said, and I'm quoting here, "that would be the equivalent of 'that's all a dream.' No, I assure you that is not how we're going to end the show. We've known where we've been going for a while, and we feel comfortable with it." Matt Duffer apparently chuckled about the whole thing, making a joke about how wild the theory was, but Ross was pretty firm in his denial. He even added that they're happy with the direction and have known for some time how the show's ending, and hopefully it satisfies everyone. I mean, think about it. If you're the Duffer Brothers, you've spent nearly a decade building this world, creating these characters, crafting this story about friendship and trauma, and growing up and fighting literal monsters. Why would you throw all of that away for a twist that basically says, gotcha, none of it was real, not even in the context of our fictional universe? It would be like if Game of Thrones had ended with someone waking up and realizing Westeros was just a fever dream. Oh wait, that would have probably been better than what we actually got, but that's beside the point. The theory persists despite being debunked, which honestly baffles me a bit. I suppose some people are really attached to the idea, or maybe they just don't believe the Duffers' denial. But I'm taking them at their word on this one. The show is not a D&D campaign, it's a show that loves D&D and uses it as a storytelling device and thematic framework, but the events are actually happening within the show's universe. But speaking of theories that make no sense, there's one that's not just dumb, but actually kind of offensive. Now, this next one is not just dumb, it's actually kind of gross when you really think about it. The theory goes like this. Everything that's happening in Stranger Things, all the monsters and the upside down, and the government experiments, it's all actually happening in the minds of patients in a psychiatric hospital. The kids aren't really fighting demogorgons. They're just mentally ill children hallucinating or imagining these adventures together. Maybe they're all in group therapy. Maybe they're sharing some kind of collective delusion. The details vary depending on who's telling it. But the core idea is always the same. None of it's real, not even within the show's universe. We have to say it. This theory is not good at all. First off, suggesting that all of this is just the product of mental illness is really problematic. It plays into these harmful stereotypes about people dealing with mental health conditions, like their experiences aren't valid or they're just living in fantasy worlds. It's 2025, we should be past this kind of thing. The show actually handles mental health pretty thoughtfully when it does address it. Max's grief and depression in season 4, Will's trauma from the upside down, these are portrayed with genuine care and sensitivity. To reduce all of that to they're just crazy feels really reductive and honestly kind of offensive. Beyond the ethical issues, it's also just terrible storytelling. Much like the D&D theory, it's another version of it was all a dream. You're invalidating everything the audience has invested in. All the emotional beats, all the character growth, all the relationships we've come to care about. None of it matters because the characters are just delusional. Why would anyone want that ending? It also doesn't make any sense with how the show is structured. We see things from multiple perspectives. We follow characters when they're alone. We see government facilities and Russian bases and the upside down itself in detail. If this were all happening in someone's head, whose head is it? Are we supposed to believe multiple patients are sharing the exact same hallucination with perfect consistency? That's not how mental illness works. That's not how anything works. The theory also completely misses what Stranger Things is actually about. It's a show about trauma and healing, about friendship and growing up, about found family and standing up to evil, even when you're scared. It uses supernatural horror as a metaphor for real childhood fears and anxieties, but the supernatural elements are still real within the show's world. They matter. Taking that away doesn't make the story deeper or more meaningful. It just makes it depressing and kind of cruel. Honestly, I think this theory exists because some people have this weird need to explain away anything fantastical or supernatural. They can't just accept that a show has magic or monsters in it, so they try to find a realistic explanation that makes it all mundane. But Stranger Things isn't trying to be realistic. It's a sci-fi horror show. The monsters are supposed to be real. That's the whole point. Let's just move on from this one quickly, yeah? Speaking of Will, let's talk about another theory involving him that's slightly less offensive, but equally bonkers. Alright, so this theory is certainly something. The idea here is that the Will Byers we've been watching since he came back from the Upside Down in Season 1, or at least since the end of Season 2, when the Mind Flayer supposedly left his body, isn't actually Will at all. He's a clone, a duplicate created by Vecna to infiltrate the group and spy on them or manipulate them or do whatever evil masterminds do with their plant agents. The real Will, according to this theory, is still trapped somewhere in the Upside Down, probably suffering horribly while his friends and family live with an imposter. I can see where this comes from, honestly. Will has this really unsettling connection to the Upside Down that never fully goes away. Even after the Mind Flayer is supposedly expelled from his body at the end of Season 2, he still gets these visions and sensations. He can feel when the Mind Flayer is near. He touches the back of his neck like he's sensing something. In Season 4, he's clearly still connected to Vecna somehow, talking about how he can feel him and how Vecna won't stop until everyone is dead. It's proper eerie. So fans started wondering, what if there's a reason for that connection beyond just he spent time in the Upside Down? What if Will isn't Will anymore? What if Vecna did something to him during that week he was missing, or during one of his many traumatic encounters with Upside Down nasties? The theory suggests that, at some point, maybe when Joyce thought she was rescuing him, she actually brought back a copy, a Vecna-made duplicate programmed to seem like Will, but actually serving as eyes and ears for the enemy. Here's the thing, though. This theory has more holes in it than Swiss cheese. First, Joyce would notice, she's his mum. She spent a week tearing apart walls and stringing up Christmas lights, and refusing to believe her son was dead. You really think she wouldn't notice if the kid who came back wasn't actually her kid? Parents know their children. The way they move, the way they talk, their little habits and quirks. A clone wouldn't get all of that right. And even if it did, there would be something off. Joyce would feel it. The same goes for Jonathan, who's been Will's fiercely protective older brother since birth, and Mike, who's been Will's best friend since they were tiny, and the entire rest of the party, who know Will intimately. The show makes it very clear that Will is still Will. He's traumatized, he's changed by his experiences, but he's the same person. His personality, his interests, his relationships, they all track consistently. Also, we see things from Will's perspective. We're in his head during his visions. We see his genuine emotions, his fears, his feelings for Mike that he's struggling with. If he were a clone programmed by Vecna, why would we see all that internal character development? Why would Vecna give his spy complicated feelings about his sexuality? That doesn't make any tactical sense. The theory also doesn't account for the fact that we see Will's body being kept alive in the Upside Down in Season 1. He's got that slug thing down his throat. He's covered in vines, but he's alive. Joyce and Hopper rescue that exact body. There's no switch, no substitution. The show is pretty clear about the continuity there. And honestly, if the Duffer Brothers were planning something this massive, we'd have gotten way more breadcrumbs by now. This isn't the kind of twist you just spring on people in the final season without any real setup. The Mind Flayer possession in Season 2 was heavily foreshadowed. Vecna's identity reveal in Season 4 had clues planted throughout the season and callbacks to earlier episodes. A Will is a clone reveal would need similar scaffolding, and it just isn't there. What we actually have is a traumatized kid who spent time in a nightmare dimension and came back changed. That's not evidence of replacement. That's just trauma. It's wild, but not in a good way. But let's talk about theories involving other characters, because Will isn't the only one getting the clone treatment in fan speculation. This next one is actually kind of cute, even if it makes zero sense. In the very first episode of Season 4, the Hellfire Club is playing Dungeons and Dragons. Eddie's running the campaign, and it comes down to Dustin and Erica trying to defeat Vecna in the game. Dustin rolls and fails. Everyone's devastated. But then Erica steps up, rolls the dice, and lands the critical hit that wins the campaign. Everyone goes absolutely mental celebrating. It's a brilliant scene. So naturally, fans on Facebook and Twitter and TikTok started theorizing that this scene is massive foreshadowing. If Erica defeats Vecna in the D&D game, then obviously Erica is going to defeat Vecna in real life. It's literary symmetry. It's the Duffer Brothers being clever. It's all been leading to this moment where Erica Sinclair, the youngest member of the extended group, saves everyone. I love Erica. She's got some of the best lines in the entire show. She's fierce and smart, and she doesn't take anyone's rubbish. When she tells Steve and Robin and Dustin that she's a nerd in Season 3, it's genuinely one of my favourite character moments. She's brilliant, but come on. Defeating Vecna in the actual show requires powers. Telekinesis at minimum. Probably a whole bunch of other abilities we haven't even seen yet. Erica doesn't have powers. She's just a really clever kid who's good at D&D and excellent at navigating air vents. Those are great skills, but they're not fight an interdimensional psychic monster skills. The D&D game is thematic, sure. It's meant to echo the real threat they're facing, but it's not meant to be taken literally. Eddie isn't going to pick up a guitar and defeat Vecna through the power of rock and roll. Oh wait, he kind of did that actually. Bad example. But you get what I mean. If the show were going to have someone unexpected defeat Vecna, it would need to be set up properly. We'd need to see Erica developing abilities or discovering some crucial weakness that only she can exploit. We'd need actual narrative scaffolding. A single scene of her rolling a natural 20 in a D&D game isn't enough. Also, Vecna is the big bad of the entire series. His defeat is going to involve Eleven, probably Will, maybe Max if she wakes up, and the core group we've been following since Season 1. It's going to be emotional and earned and tied to all the character arcs we've been watching develop. As much as I'd love to see Erica get her moment of glory, this isn't it. Erica is brilliant, but she's not defeating Vecna. Sorry. Now, let's talk about everyone's favourite character from Season 4 and one of the most persistent theories about his fate, Eddie Munson. God, everyone loved Eddie. He showed up in Season 4 with his big hair and his Metallica shirt and his whole metalhead outcast vibe. And within about 2 episodes, the entire fan base had completely fallen for him. He was funny and kind and passionate about the things he cared about. He took the younger kids under his wing. He stood up for them when the town turned against him. And then, in one of the most heartbreaking scenes in the entire series, he died a hero in the Upside Down, covered in demobat bites, knowing full well he wasn't going to make it out. It was devastating. Dustin crying over his body. The fact that the town still thinks he's a murderer. The knowledge that his name will never be cleared, that his uncle will never know the truth about what really happened. It's genuinely one of the saddest deaths in the show, and that's saying something considering we've lost Bob and Alexi and Billy. So of course fans immediately started looking for ways to bring him back. The theory goes like this. In Dungeons and Dragons, there's a character called Kaz the Bloody-Handed. He's Vecna's right-hand man, a vampire who was once human but died and was resurrected to serve Vecna. Eventually, Kaz betrays Vecna and helps defeat him. Now in that first Hellfire Club scene in Season 4, Mike mentions that Vecna was killed by Kaz. The show is constantly pulling from D&D lore, so fans put 2 and 2 together and got Eddie returning as a vampire. The parallels are actually pretty interesting. Eddie died from bat bites, and Kaz is a vampire, and vampires are basically associated with bats. Eddie wielded a makeshift spear and a trash can lid shield in his final moments, and Kaz is known for his sword and shield. Eddie sacrificed himself fighting Vecna's creatures, just like Kaz eventually turns against Vecna in the game. On paper it tracks. And look, I get it. I really do. We all want Eddie back. Joseph Quinn was incredible in the role. Eddie's death felt unfair because he'd just been introduced and we'd barely gotten to know him. There was so much more they could have done with his character. A whole redemption arc in the eyes of Hawkins. A proper friendship with Steve developing beyond that one moment in the Upside Down. More scenes with Dustin. The actor himself seemed game to come back. It would have been brilliant. But here's the thing. The Duffer Brothers have confirmed multiple times that Eddie is dead. Properly dead. Not coming back dead. They've said in interviews that Eddie's death was meaningful, that it was his hero moment, and that bringing him back would undermine the sacrifice he made. He chose to stay and fight instead of running, which was his whole character arc in a nutshell. He finally stood his ground. Resurrection would cheapen that. The show also has a pattern of introducing beloved characters and killing them off in the same season. Bob Newby in Season 2, superhero and Joyce's lovely boyfriend, Alexei in Season 3, the adorable Russian scientist who just wanted to watch Looney Tunes and enjoy a Slurpee. Now Eddie in Season 4. It's brutal, but it's what Stranger Things does. These deaths raise the stakes. They remind us that not everyone makes it out alive, even the characters we absolutely adore. If we're being completely honest, bringing Eddie back as some kind of undead vampire servant would be weird tonally. Stranger Things doesn't really do zombies or resurrection in that way. The show is about monsters from another dimension, not the supernatural undead rising from graves. It would feel out of place. The most we're likely to get is maybe a flashback. Perhaps someone remembers Eddie, or we see a scene set before his death. That would be lovely, actually. But as for him coming back as Cass and helping defeat Vecna, I just don't see it happening. Eddie died a hero. He saved Dustin. He bought time for the others. His last words were about not running away. It was tragic and beautiful, and it meant something. Let's let him rest as one. Since we're on the topic of characters and their fates, there's another theory that's even darker than Eddie's death, and it involves Max. Now this one is dark, really dark. At the end of season 4, Max is in really bad shape. Vecna's got her up in the air, her bones are snapping one by one, her eyes are starting to bleed. Lucas is screaming. It's absolutely horrific. 11 manages to fight Vecna off from inside Max's mind, and she falls. But by the time Lucas gets to her, her heart has stopped. She's dead for over a minute. 11, from wherever she is in the pizza place freezer or whatever, somehow brings her back. Max's heart starts again. She's breathing. But when we see her in the hospital, at the end of the season, she's in a coma. And when 11 tries to reach her mind, there's nothing there, just empty blackness. Max's body is alive, but her consciousness is gone. Vecna took it. She's basically brain dead, kept alive by machines, and 11's intervention. You really have to feel for Max. She's been through hell. Her stepbrother died and she's been drowning in guilt and grief. Vecna specifically targeted her because of that trauma. She nearly died, got briefly saved by the power of Kate Bush, and then got caught again. And now she's trapped in this horrible liminal state between life and death. So the theory goes like this. Vecna is going to take over Max's empty body. He'll possess her, use her as a vessel, and the final confrontation of the series will be 11 having to fight Vecna while he's inside her best friend. To defeat him, to save the world, 11 will have to kill Max. She'll have to choose between her friend and literally everyone else. Oh, if this prediction comes true, this will truly be heartbreaking. Grab the tissue box now. The theory isn't completely without merit, I suppose. Max's body is alive, but her mind is gone, which does leave a vacancy that something could theoretically fill. Vecna has demonstrated the ability to possess people before. The Mind Flayer did it to Will and to Billy, and forcing 11 to kill her friend would be the ultimate psychological torture, which is very much Vecna's style. It would be devastating in exactly the way that would break 11's spirit. But here's why I don't think it's going to happen. The Duffer Brothers have said multiple times that Stranger Things isn't Game of Thrones. They're not interested in killing off main characters just for shock value or to prove how dark and edgy they can be. They want emotional stakes, sure, but they also want the show to have heart. Making 11 murder her comatose best friend feels less like meaningful tragedy and more like gratuitous cruelty. Max has already suffered enough. She lost Billy. She's been dealing with depression and suicidal thoughts. She got tortured by Vecna. She died and came back, but now she's trapped in a coma. How much more trauma can you pile onto one character before it stops being dramatically effective and just becomes misery porn? Also, there's the simple fact that Season 5 is supposed to be about defeating Vecna and saving the world, and hopefully giving these characters some kind of resolution. Max waking up from her coma would be a moment of hope and triumph. Having her body turned into a meat puppet for the villain to inhabit goes against the emotional arc the show is building toward. I think Max will wake up. It might take most of the season, but she'll come back. And when she does, it'll be a proper Max, not Vecna wearing her skin. Max has been through enough. I don't think the Duffers are that cruel. But talking a bit about other character theories, there's one that requires us to completely ignore what we saw happen on screen. Right, so this theory requires us to completely ignore what we saw happen in Season 4. Before Season 4 Volume 1 dropped, Netflix released a bunch of character posters to get people excited. One of them featured Karen Wheeler, the mum of Mike and Nancy and Holly. Just a normal promotional poster. But fans, being fans, decided this meant something massive. They started theorising that Karen Wheeler is actually Alice Creel, Victor Creel's daughter, who was supposedly killed by Vecna back in 1959. The theory suggests that Alice didn't actually die. She somehow survived having her eyes explode and her limbs snapped and whatever other horrific things Vecna did to her family that night. She escaped, changed her identity, and eventually became Karen Wheeler. Living a normal suburban life in Hawkins, married to Ted, raising 3 kids, completely unaware of her true past. Or maybe she is aware and has been hiding it all along. It's an interesting idea on paper, I suppose. Karen has always been a bit of an enigma. She's there in the background, being a mum, occasionally having weird moments like that whole thing with Billy in season 3, that we're all trying to forget. Maybe there's more to her than meets the eye. Maybe she's got this dark secret history that's about to become relevant. We hate to break it to you, but Alice Creel is dead. We watched her die. In season 4, when Vecna shows Nancy his memories, we see exactly what happened to the Creel family. Young Henry, who had become Vecna, used his powers to murder his mother and sister. Alice's eyes went white and started bleeding. Her bones snapped. She died screaming on the floor of that house. It wasn't ambiguous, it wasn't a fake out. She died properly and completely, right there on screen. That's not an injury anyone comes back from. Your eyes exploding inside your skull, and all your limbs being broken by psychic force, isn't something you just walk off and then go have a normal life in suburban Indiana. Even in a show with supernatural healing and government experiments and interdimensional monsters, that's too much. The timeline doesn't even work. Alice would be way older than Karen if she'd survived. The Creel murders happened in 1959. Karen Wheeler appears to be in her 40s in the 1980s. The maths doesn't add up unless Alice somehow stopped aging, or we're meant to believe she looks remarkably young for someone in her 50s or 60s. Also, the show would have given us some hints by now. Season 4 was all about the Creel family and Vecna's origin story. If Karen had any connection to that, any connection at all, they would have mentioned it. There would have been a moment of recognition, a flashback, something. But there's nothing. Because Karen isn't Alice, she's just Karen. This theory exists purely because fans saw a character poster and decided it must mean something deep. Sometimes a poster is just a poster. Not everything is a clue. Alice is dead. Proper dead. Let's move on. Now let's talk about some theories involving family connections that are slightly less impossible, but still pretty wild. Okay, so this one is definitely going to be this generation's I am your father moment. If it were true, which it probably isn't. The theory is absolutely wild and it goes like this. 11 isn't actually the biological daughter of Terry Ives and some random bloke. She's the daughter of Terry Ives and Henry Creel, also known as IE01, also known as Vecna. The theory suggests that during Terry's time as a test subject in Brenner's experiments, she and Henry had some kind of relationship, or at least a physical encounter, and Terry got pregnant. Brenner knew about this, allegedly, and followed her pregnancy once it was discovered. When Elle was born, Brenner took her and raised her as part of his numbered children program, knowing full well that she was Henry's biological child. This may be dark for Stranger Things, but what if Henry inseminated some women, some test subjects, including Elle's mother, with his DNA? That's one version of the theory floating around Reddit. It gets pretty convoluted pretty quickly. The timeline does sort of work, weirdly enough. Terry Ives was part of the MKUltra experiments in 1969. 11 was born in 1971. That's a 2-year window that would allow for Terry to have conceived during or shortly after her time with Brenner. Henry was at the lab during that period. He'd been there since he was a child, being studied and experimented on. So theoretically, they could have crossed paths. The theory also tries to explain why 11 and 01 have such similar powers. Most of the numbered children have fairly limited abilities. They can maybe move small objects or see things remotely, or start small fires. But 11 and Henry both have this massive range of telekinetic and telepathic abilities that far exceed everyone else. If they're related by blood, that would explain the similarity. She inherited his power level, basically. It would also explain why Henry was so interested in 11 specifically. In Season 4, when they show the massacre at the lab, we see that 01 singled Elle out. He talked to her, helped her, encouraged her to embrace her anger. He killed the other kids and the guards, but he wanted Elle to join him. Some fans think that's because he recognized something in her, maybe even knew she was his daughter on some level. There's also this whole thing about how Elle opened the gate to the Upside Down when she banished Henry. She was the one who sent him there in the first place, which created Vecna. If they're related, there's this poetic tragedy to the idea that a father and daughter are locked in this cosmic battle, and she's the one who created the monster he became. It's going to be this generation's I am your father moment, people keep saying. The big reveal. The twist nobody saw coming. Honestly, though, I'm not convinced. First off, the show has never hinted at this. Terry's backstory is shown pretty clearly. She was a test subject, she got pregnant, Brenna took the baby and told her she miscarried. There's no mention of Henry being involved. No suggestion that the pregnancy was anything other than Terry's own biological child with her partner. If this were the plan, they'd have planted seeds by now. Second, Brenna wouldn't have treated 11 the way he did if he knew she was Henry's child. Brenna was obsessed with Henry. He studied him for years, tried to understand and control his powers. If Elle were Henry's biological offspring, Brenna would have been absolutely fascinated by that. He would have mentioned it, used it, weaponized that knowledge somehow, but he treats Elle like just another numbered subject, not like the genetic descendant of his most powerful patient. Third, the power similarity can be explained without shared DNA. Brenna was trying to recreate what Henry could do. He experimented on pregnant women to induce powers in their children. Some of those attempts failed or produced weak results. 11 was the most successful, which is why she's so powerful. It's not genetics, it's whatever. Cocktail of drugs and procedures Brenna used on Terry. The theory actually has legs in terms of timeline and thematic resonance. I'll give it that. The Star Wars parallel is appealing, and it would certainly be dramatic, but I think it's reading too much into what's actually just a villain recognizing someone with similar abilities and trying to manipulate them to his side. It's interesting, I'll give it that. But I'm not convinced. Let's move on to theories about powers and abilities that are slightly more grounded in what the show has actually given us. Will Byers cannot catch a break in these theories, can he? The poor kid gets kidnapped in Season 1, possessed by the Mind Flayer in Season 2, watches all his friends couple up while he's left out in Season 3, and then gets shipped off to California in Season 4, where he's pining after Mike and dealing with his continued psychic connection to Vecna. He's always going through something. And now fans think he's about to develop fire powers. The theory goes like this. Will has this lingering connection to the Upside Down that's never fully gone away, even though the Mind Flayer was supposedly expelled from his body at the end of Season 2, he still gets these sensations, these visions, this awareness of what's happening in that dimension. He touched the back of his neck throughout Season 3 whenever the Mind Flayer was near. In Season 4, he can feel Vecna, sense his plans, know when he's about to strike. There's clearly something still linking him to that world. So fans started noticing patterns. In Dungeons & Dragons, Will's character is a cleric who uses fire-based attacks. He's drawn to fire abilities in the game. Then there's the painting he made for Mike in Season 4, which features the party fighting a dragon. Dragons breathe fire. Nancy, while possessed by Vecna, has a vision of Hawkins burning. She sees downtown on fire, dead soldiers, everything consumed by flames. Will specifically mentions this vision to the others, saying Vecna showed her the future. Fun fact, There are loads of instances throughout the series where Will is associated with fire imagery. The Mind Flayer's weakness in Season 2 was heat. They burned it out of Will using heaters. Fire has been this recurring element in his story. So the theory suggests that Will is going to develop pyrokinesis, the ability to create and control fire, and he'll use it to fight Vecna in the final season. I actually think this one might have something to it. It would make narrative sense. Will's been sidelined for most of the series, despite being the catalyst for everything. He disappeared in episode 1 and kicked off the entire plot, but since coming back, he's mostly been a supporting character in his own story. The Duffer Brothers have said that Season 5 is going to centre Will in a big way, that he's going to be crucial to defeating Vecna. Giving him powers would be one way to do that. It would also explain why Vecna didn't kill him. In Season 1, when the Demogorgon took Will, it could have killed him immediately, but it didn't. It kept him alive in the Upside Down. Vecna, who we now know was controlling everything, even back then, chose to spare Will for a reason. Maybe he sensed potential in him. Maybe being in the Upside Down awakened something latent. The fire symbolism is definitely there. It's not just fans reading into random details. The show has deliberately connected Will to fire imagery multiple times. That feels intentional. But here's the thing. The show might be setting up something different. Will's connection to the Upside Down could be purely psychic, not physical. Maybe his power is that he can sense Vecna, track him, predict his moves. That would make him valuable without needing to shoot flames from his hands. Sometimes the quiet powers are more interesting than the flashy ones. Also, introducing major new abilities in the final season is tricky. There's a lot of ground to cover already. They've got to wrap up Max's storyline, defeat Vecna, close the gates, resolve everyone's character arcs. Adding Will learns he has fire powers to that list might be spreading things too thin. Out of all the power theories, though, this one's the most plausible, honestly. The evidence is there. Whether the Duffers will actually go that route is another question entirely. But let's talk about some theories that are way less plausible and venture into proper bonkers territory. Now, this next theory makes me proper sad just thinking about it. One of the more popular theories floating around is that 11 is going to defeat Vecna by erasing everyone's memories of the Upside Down and everything that's happened. The whole ordeal, all the trauma, all the monsters, all the death and destruction, just wiped clean from everyone's minds. The gates would close, Vecna would be defeated, and Hawkins would go back to normal. Except nobody would remember any of it. Not the battles, not the friendships forged in crisis, not the people they lost. Nothing. And 11 would be the only one who remembers. She'd have to watch her friends and family go about their lives, completely unaware of what they went through together, unable to recognize her or understand why she's so attached to them. She'd be alone with all those memories, unable to share them with anyone. It feels very Spider-Man, No Way Home, doesn't it? The hero makes the ultimate sacrifice by erasing themselves from everyone's memory to save the world. It's tragic and noble and absolutely devastating, but not good at all. The theory comes partially from the fact that the Duffer Brothers have mentioned Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind as one of their inspirations. That film is all about erasing memories of relationships, and it's got this bittersweet quality to it. Some fans on Reddit have pointed out the connection and suggested that the show might be building toward a similar ending. 11 defeats Vecna, but has to reset everyone's memories to truly close the gates and end the threat. Perhaps that's the only way Vecna and the Upside Down can finally lose all their power. According to the theory, 11 has been leveling up her powers throughout the series. By season 5, maybe she'll have developed the ability to mass erase memories. She already demonstrated in season 1 that she can wipe specific memories or manipulate what people perceive, scaling that up to affect an entire town, or everyone who knows about the Upside Down isn't completely outside the realm of possibility. I mean, think about it from a certain angle. As long as people remember the Upside Down As long as that knowledge exists, maybe the gates can keep opening. Maybe the connection persists through collective memory and trauma. Wiping it all away could theoretically sever that connection permanently. But honestly, this would be such an unsatisfying ending. Eleven's whole journey has been about finding family and connection. She started the series as a lonely lab experiment who'd never experienced love or friendship. Over 4 seasons, she's built this incredible found family, with the boys, with Max, with Hopper and Joyce. She's learned what it means to belong somewhere, to be cared for, to have people who would do anything for her. Taking all of that away and leaving her isolated with only her memories would be cruel. It would also undermine one of the show's core themes. Stranger Things is about the power of friendship and love to overcome darkness. It's about how shared trauma can bond people together. It's about remembering the people we've lost and honouring their sacrifices. A memory wipe erases all of that. It's saying that the only way to move forward is to forget, which goes against everything the show has been building. 11 would lose everyone she loves essentially, and have to watch them live from afar. She'd see Mike with someone else, not remembering their relationship. She'd watch Hopper and Joyce being a family without her. She'd be a stranger to Max, to Dustin, to Lucas, to Will. That's not bittersweet, that's just heartbreaking in the worst way. I really hope they don't go this route. It would be heartbreaking, and not in a good way. The show deserves better than that, and so do the characters. Speaking of endings, there's another theory about how the show concludes that's based entirely on an episode title. Right, so episode 8 of season 5 is titled The Right Side Up, and fans have lost their minds over it. The final episode of the entire series is called The Right Side Up, which is obviously playing on the upside down. It's a mirror of the show's central concept. So naturally, people started theorizing that this means 11 is going to transform the upside down into some kind of paradise dimension. She's going to flip it, basically, turn the nightmare world into a proper, livable place. The right side up. The theory actually originated about 3 years ago on Reddit, long before we had the episode title. Someone posted this elaborate idea that 11 is fundamentally connected to the upside down in a way nobody else is. She's like a living portal, a link between dimensions. According to the theory, as long as she exists in the normal world, gates will continue to open. The upside down will keep trying to break through because she's this beacon, this connection point that can't be severed. The theory states, and I'm paraphrasing here, that as long as 11 stays in our world, the upside down and its creatures will keep appearing. She's like a D&D sorcerer with an innate link to another dimension. Gates will continue to open no matter what they do. Therefore, the show can't end with her living happily ever after, with Mike going to school, using her powers sparingly. She's different, and things can't get back to normal as long as she's on Earth. So the solution, according to this theory, is that 11 has to leave. She has to go into the upside down and stay there permanently. But here's where it gets really convoluted. Instead of just sacrificing herself to close the gates, she's going to use her massive powers to transform the upside down itself. She'll become its new ruler, replacing Vecna, and turn it from a hellscape into a paradise. The upside down becomes the right side up. A beautiful mirror dimension instead of a horrifying one. When you really dig into it, though, this doesn't make a lot of sense. First off, we've never been told that 11 is causing the gates to open just by existing. The gates open when there's massive psychic energy being used, or when Vecna is actively creating them, or when Elle tears holes in reality while fighting. It's not like she's passively radiating portal energy all the time. If that were the case, gates would have been opening constantly throughout the series whenever she was around. Second, transforming an entire dimension seems a bit beyond even 11's capabilities. She's incredibly powerful, sure, but creating a whole new reality, rewriting the fundamental nature of the upside down, that's God-level stuff. Even at her strongest, Elle struggles with things like lifting helicopters or fighting Vecna. Completely restructuring a parallel dimension feels like a massive leap. Third, this would still be a tragic ending. Elle stuck in another dimension, forever, separated from everyone she loves, even if that dimension is nice now. She's still alone. She still sacrificed everything. It's just a prettier prison. The episode title is probably just symbolic. The right side up likely refers to the world returning to normal after Vecna is defeated, things getting flipped back to how they should be. The natural order being restored. It doesn't have to mean literal dimensional transformation. I don't know about this one. When you look at the actual mechanics of it, it feels like fans are taking a cool-sounding episode title and building an entire elaborate theory around it without considering whether it actually makes sense within the show's established rules. The title is intriguing, but I think people are reading way too much into it. Now let's talk about theories involving creatures and monsters, because apparently Demobats aren't scary enough on their own. This theory involves Will again, and also involves massive flying dragons, so you know what, I'm kind of here for it, even if it's ridiculous. In Season 4, Will creates this painting that he gives to Mike. It shows the party fighting a massive red dragon. At the time, it seems like it's just Will's artistic interpretation of their adventures, a metaphor for them battling monsters together. But some fans think it's actually foreshadowing. Will might have the ability to see the future, similar to how Henry could draw things before they happened. And if Will drew a dragon, maybe that means there's going to be a dragon. The theory gets more specific. When Steve, Nancy, Robin and Eddie went through the Watergate into the Upside Down in Season 4, they encountered loads of Demobats. These things swarmed them, attacked them, killed Eddie eventually. They're horrible creatures, but fans noticed that these Demobats look strikingly similar to the dragon in Will's painting. Same general shape, same sort of vibe, leathery wings, vicious teeth, dark colouring. So the theory goes that the Demobats aren't actually fully grown. They're babies, juvenile dragons breeding in the Upside Down, and they're going to mature into massive, fire-breathing monsters by Season 5. Nancy had that vision while possessed by Vecna, where she saw an army of creatures attacking Hawkins. Maybe that army includes adult dragons that the Demobats have grown into. In Dungeons & Dragons, there's a monster called a Calistrix, which is basically an undead dragon. It fits with the show's pattern of pulling creature designs from D&D lore. The Demogorgon, the Mind Flayer, Vecna himself, they're all D&D references. Why not dragons? We know that Henry, or Vecna, has the ability to basically create or shape the creatures in the Upside Down. He drew the Mind Flayer into existence. Maybe he's been cultivating these Demobats, waiting for them to evolve into something more devastating. A final weapon for the ultimate battle. Will's ability to sense and maybe predict what's happening in the Upside Down could explain why he drew a dragon specifically. He's tapped into what Vecna's planning, even if he doesn't consciously realise it. His art is his subconscious trying to warn everyone about what's coming. Honestly, this would be cool to see. Stranger Things has given us plenty of monsters, but it hasn't really done dragons yet. Seeing the party face off against massive flying beasts in the final season would be absolutely brilliant. It would raise the stakes even higher than they already are. Plus, dragons are just inherently cinematic. The special effects budget would be insane, but it would look incredible. The main problem is that we're already in the final season, and there's been no indication that the Demobats are anything other than what they appear to be, fully grown bat monsters. If they were going to evolve or grow, we'd probably need to see that process starting. There's not a lot of time to introduce and develop a whole new monster type when they've still got to wrap up Vecna's storyline. It won't happen, but it would be amazing if it did. But let's talk about a theory that's slightly more grounded in the show's actual lore, involving Will's connection to Vecna. Okay, so this one gets pretty deep into D&D lore, which the show absolutely loves to reference. In Dungeons & Dragons, the Eye of Vecna is this legendary artifact. It's literally Vecna's actual eye, ripped from his head and imbued with massive power. If someone removes their own eye and replaces it with the eye of Vecna, they gain incredible abilities. True seeing, the ability to perceive things across dimensions, immunity to certain magics, all sorts of god-tier powers. But there's a cost. The eye corrupts whoever uses it, slowly turning them toward evil and connecting them to Vecna himself. It's a cursed object that grants power while destroying the user. The theory suggests that Will Byers is, metaphorically, or perhaps literally, the eye of Vecna. Think about it. Will has this unique ability to perceive the upside down and sense Vecna's presence. He can feel when Vecna is near, predict his attacks, understand his plans to some degree. He's basically serving as an early warning system for the group. In Season 4, he keeps touching the back of his neck and getting these sensations. He tells Mike that he can feel Vecna, that Vecna won't stop until everyone is dead. He's connected to Vecna in a way nobody else is, not even Eleven. The theory argues that Vecna needs Will alive specifically because Will is his eye into the normal world. When Vecna took Will in Season 1, he wasn't just randomly kidnapping a kid. He was claiming his artifact, his connection point. Will survived an entire week in the Upside Down, which nobody else has done without dying or being possessed long term. Maybe that's because Vecna wanted him alive, needed him functioning as this bridge between dimensions. Will's time in the Upside Down fundamentally changed him. He came back different. Not possessed exactly, but altered, connected. He's got this psychic link that persists even after the Mind Flayer was expelled. According to the theory, this link is permanent because Will is serving as Vecna's eye, whether he knows it or not. Vecna can see through Will, sense through Will, maybe even influence Will to some degree. It's actually pretty clever when you think about it. The show has consistently used D&D as a framework for understanding the supernatural threats they face. The kids name monsters after D&D creatures because it helps them conceptualize what they're fighting. So, having Will literally be a D&D artifact brought into the real world would fit that pattern perfectly. The theory also explains why Vecna hasn't killed Will, despite having multiple opportunities. Will is useful alive. He's a spy, a connection, a way for Vecna to monitor what the party's doing and planning. Killing Will would sever that connection. I think this theory is creative, and I appreciate the D&D deep cut. The Eye of Vecna is one of those legendary items that any long-time player would recognize. Using it as a metaphor for Will's role is genuinely clever, but I'm not entirely convinced it's literal. Will's connection to Vecna seems more like residual trauma and psychic scarring than an intentional artifact situation. He's not giving Vecna information or helping him. He's just sensing Vecna's presence because he's been exposed to the Upside Down for so long. It's like having heightened awareness after a traumatic event, not being literally transformed into a magical object. Still, it's one of the more interesting symbolic interpretations I've seen. It's creative, and I appreciate the D&D deep cut, but I don't buy it. Let's move on to theories about specific characters returning from the dead or faking their deaths. Steve Harrington, Hare, babysitter extraordinaire, and according to some fans, future fake death victim. Steve's had one of the best character arcs in the entire show. He started as this stereotypical popular jock boyfriend in Season 1, kind of a prat, honestly, and then transformed into everyone's favourite, protective older brother figure. He's wielding a nail bat and fighting demogorgons. He's driving a bunch of kids around in his BMW and giving them terrible romantic advice. He's working at Scoops Ahoy and getting tortured by Russians. He's becoming best mates with Robin and having deep conversations about life and love. It's been brilliant to watch, but fans are convinced he's going to die in Season 5. The show has a pattern of killing off beloved characters, especially the ones who talk about their hopes for the future. Bob mentioned wanting to move to Maine with Joyce, dead by the end of the season. Alexei was excited about staying in America and watching cartoons, dead within hours. Eddie talked about being sick of running away, dead that same episode. It's like mentioning your dreams is a death sentence. Steve has been talking about wanting 6 little nuggets, 6 kids, a big family, road trips in an RV, the whole domestic dream. According to fan logic, that means he's doomed. So some people have theorized that Steve is going to fake his death, maybe to protect the others, maybe as part of some elaborate plan to defeat Vecna, maybe because he needs to go into hiding. The theory suggests he'll stage his death, let everyone think he's gone, and then return at a crucial moment to save the day. Very dramatic, very heroic, very Steve, come on. This isn't that kind of show. Stranger Things doesn't really do fake deaths. When someone dies, they're dead. Hopper is the one exception, but his survival was set up pretty clearly. We never saw a body. There were hints throughout season 3 that he might have escaped. The Russians had the American in their prison. It was a mystery, not a fake-out. If Steve dies, he's actually dead. The show wouldn't cheapen a major character death by revealing it was all a trick. That would undermine the emotional impact and feel manipulative. Also, I genuinely don't think Steve is going to die. Joe Keery has hinted in interviews that he's happy with how Steve's story ends. And that doesn't sound like someone whose character gets killed off. It sounds like someone whose character gets a resolution, hopefully a happy one. Steve deserves his 6 little nuggets. Let the man babysit in peace. Let him have his RV and his horde of children, and his best friendship with Robin. He's earned it. I think Steve's going to be fine, honestly. Or I really hope so anyway. But speaking of characters we're worried about, there's a theory about someone who appeared briefly in season 2 and then vanished from the show entirely. Remember Carly, 8, from that one episode in season 2 that everyone either loves or hates. Season 2, episode 7, The Lost Sister. 11 goes on a side quest to Chicago, meets Carly Prasad, who was also experimented on by Brenner. And they have this whole bonding thing about being lab kids with powers. Carly can make people see things that aren't there, create illusions, manipulate what people perceive. It's a really powerful ability. She uses it to get revenge on the people who hurt her when she was in the lab. The episode is massively divisive. Some people love it for giving Elle a chance to explore her identity and see what she could become if she chose revenge over family. Other people think it completely breaks the pacing of the season and feels like filler. Either way, Carly appeared for that one episode and then was never mentioned again. Elle left Chicago, went back to Hawkins, and Carly just disappeared from the story. So fans started wondering what happened to her, and some of them came up with a pretty dark theory. Vecna has the ability to make people hallucinate. He shows them visions of their trauma, their fears, their guilt. It's a core part of how he operates. He traps people in these nightmare scenarios before killing them. Now, Carly also has hallucination powers. She can make people see things that aren't real. The abilities are really similar, actually. Different applications, maybe, but the same fundamental skill. The theory suggests that Vecna killed Carly off-screen, probably sometime between season 2 and season 4, and absorbed her powers. That's why he can create such detailed, personalized hallucinations. He took Carly's ability and added it to his own arsenal. One Reddit user put it like this: "Is it just me that thinks that Vecna has already killed Carly? His ability to make people hallucinate, show things that are not there is very similar to what her powers were. It would explain why she hasn't returned or been mentioned. She's dead." Vecna got to her before the events of season 4, and nobody knows about it because she was off in Chicago, separated from the main group. But honestly, this feels like a waste of potential. Carly was one of the numbered children. She's got a direct connection to Eleven's past and to Brenner's experiments. If she were going to die, especially if it were going to be at Vecna's hands, that would be a significant event worth showing on screen. Killing her off screen and never mentioning it would be really odd storytelling. It would be weird if they just forgot about her completely. The show has a habit of bringing back characters and plot threads when they're relevant. Murray disappeared for ages and then came back. Owens vanished and returned. Even minor characters get callbacks and resolutions. Carly feels like too big a character to just abandon without explanation. I think she'll probably show up again, even if just briefly. Maybe Elle reaches out to her for help in the final battle. Maybe Carly shows up with her crew to assist. Maybe there's just a line of dialogue confirming she's okay and living her life somewhere. Something to acknowledge that she exists and hasn't been murdered by the villain. But let's talk about theories involving the timeline itself and how Season 5 might mess with the very fabric of time. Right, so Season 5's official synopsis mentions time itself unraveling, and fans have absolutely run with that. The official synopsis reads, "With cracks splitting the town and time itself unraveling, 11, Mike, Will, and the rest of the crew must confront Vecna in a battle that spans dimensions and memories." That single phrase, time itself unraveling, has sent the fanbase into an absolute frenzy of speculation. Time travel theories are everywhere now. Reddit threads, TikTok videos, entire YouTube essays dedicated to proving that temporal manipulation is going to be the key to defeating Vecna. To be fair, the groundwork is there. The show has been dropping hints about time weirdness since Season 1. The Upside Down is stuck in the moment. Will disappeared, November 6th, 1983. When the gang goes into the Upside Down in later seasons, everything is still frozen on that date. Nancy's diary stops at that entry. The Wheeler house looks exactly as it did that night. Nothing has changed or moved forward. It's like time just stopped. Then there's all the clock imagery. Vecna is obsessed with clocks. His victims hear a grandfather clock chiming before he takes them. The clock appears in their visions as this ominous symbol of time running out. It's not subtle. The show is really leaning into the idea that Vecna has some relationship with time that goes beyond just being creepy and Victorian. One popular theory suggests that Vecna can already manipulate time to some degree. That would explain how he shows people visions of future events, or at least events that haven't happened yet from their perspective. It would explain why he seems to always be one step ahead, like he knows what the gang is planning before they do it. Maybe he's not just psychic. Maybe he's seeing across time. Some fans even think that 11 bringing Max back might have been a time manipulation thing. Max's heart stopped for over a minute. She was dead, but Elle somehow brought her back. The theory suggests that Elle didn't just restart Max's heart through telekinesis. She actually reversed time for Max, specifically, rewinding her death. It's a stretch, but it's an interesting idea. The first episode of Season 5 is titled The Crawl, which some people think is a reference to rewinding, like a tape crawling backwards. Bringing the show full circle back to Season 1, maybe literally through time travel. I'm not sure how I feel about this. On one hand, time travel could actually work really well for Stranger Things. The Upside Down being frozen in 1983 has always been this massive, unanswered question. If Vecna exists outside normal time somehow, then defeating him would require 11 to confront him on that same level. She'd need to evolve her powers beyond just physical manipulation into something more fundamental, fighting him across time and space simultaneously. It would also tie into the show's themes about memory and trauma. The characters are all haunted by their pasts. Max is stuck in her grief over Billy. Will can't escape what happened to him in Season 1. Nancy is dealing with Barb's death. Hopper lost his daughter. If the final battle involves literally confronting and changing the past, that could be really powerful thematically. On the other hand, time travel is a risky narrative device. It's really easy to make it feel cheap or confusing. You start getting into paradoxes and questions about what can and can't be changed. Does changing the past erase the present? Do the characters remember both timelines? It can get messy really quickly. Some people worry that using time travel is lazy writing, like it's a get-out-of-jail-free card that lets the writers undo anything they want. But I don't think the Duffers would introduce it without having thought it through properly. They've been planning the ending for years. If time manipulation is part of it, they'll have worked out how it functions within the show's rules. There's also the possibility that time itself unraveling is more metaphorical than literal. Maybe it just means that the boundaries between past and present are breaking down, memories becoming real, the past invading the present through the cracks in reality. That would still be creepy and effective without requiring actual time travel mechanics. If they do it well, it could be brilliant. If they don't, it'll be a mess. Since we're talking about big revelations, let's discuss one more theory about episode titles and what they might reveal. Episode 2 of Season 5 is called The Vanishing of, and the name is intentionally left blank. Netflix released the episode titles for Season 5, and most of them are pretty straightforward. The Crawl, The Turnbow Trap, Sorcerer, Shock Jock. They give you a vague sense of what might happen without spoiling anything. But episode 2 is different. It's literally the vanishing of what were Chi. With the name redacted, blocked out, hidden, the Duffer Brothers are clearly being cheeky about it, building mystery and speculation. So naturally, fans immediately started theorizing about who's vanishing. The most popular theory is that it's Holly Wheeler. She's the youngest Wheeler child, Mike and Nancy's little sister. For most of the series, she's been basically a background character, a cute toddler, then a slightly older kid who occasionally wanders into scenes but doesn't really do anything plot relevant. But Season 5 is supposed to give her a much bigger role. The actress playing her is older now, and the time jump in the show means Holly would be around 7 or 8 years old. Old enough to actually have a proper storyline. Having Holly vanish would parallel Will's disappearance in Season 1. The vanishing of Will Byers was the series premiere. The vanishing of Holly Wheeler would be a deliberate callback, bringing the show full circle. Another Wheeler family member dealing with their child being taken. Mike and Nancy having to search for their little sister the way they searched for Will. It would be thematically resonant. Holly has also been suspiciously present in Season 5 promotional material. She's in scenes she's clearly got more screen time. She's being positioned as more important. That could be building her up just to take her away, creating emotional stakes by making the audience care about her first. There are other candidates, obviously. Some fans think it could be Max, since she's technically already vanished into her coma. Her consciousness is gone, which is a kind of vanishing. Or maybe it's Karen Wheeler, tying into those Alice Creel theories we talked about earlier. Or maybe it's someone completely unexpected, like Dustin or Lucas, or even Murray. The Duffers love their misdirection. They could be banking on everyone assuming it's Holly and then pulling a switcheroo. That would be very them. My money's on Holly, but I could be completely wrong. The blank could be a fake out. Maybe nobody actually vanishes, and it's referring to something metaphorical, like the vanishing of hope, or innocence, or something equally dramatic and symbolic. We'll have to wait and see. Now let's talk about one of the wildest theories I've found, and I genuinely cannot tell if someone made this as a joke, or if it's accidentally hilarious. Okay, so I found this theory online, and I genuinely cannot tell if someone was taking the piss, or if AI generated it. But here we go. The theory states that the Upside Down isn't actually a nightmarish parallel dimension filled with monsters. It's a secret meeting place for alternate universe versions of the Stranger Things characters who spend their time rating horror movies, like a supernatural Rotten Tomatoes. They've got a hidden review board down there, and whenever they give a film a particularly low score, a new monster gets sent to the real world. The worse the rating, the more dangerous the creature. I don't even know where to start with this. Apparently, when Eleven finally cracks the code and figures out what's really going on, she discovers this elaborate scoring system. The Demogorgon was sent because some horror film got absolutely slated by the Upside Down Review Committee. The Mind Flayer appeared because another movie bombed spectacularly. Vecna himself is the result of the worst-rated horror film in interdimensional cinema history. According to this theory, the real world's monster problem is basically just the Upside Down's way of expressing their disappointment in the horror genre. The theory goes into detail about how the alternate versions of the characters have very specific tastes. Upside Down Mike is apparently really into psychological horror. Upside Down Dustin prefers creature features. Upside Down Nancy only watches art house horror and is very judgmental about mainstream stuff. They meet regularly to discuss films, debate their merits, and then collectively decide whether the real world deserves a new monster based on how disappointed they are. This is what happens when AI starts generating fan theories, or when someone has way too much time on their hands and decides to write the most absurd thing they can possibly imagine. I'm honestly not sure which. The theory claims that all the clocks and timepieces associated with Vecna are actually because the Upside Down review board operates on a strict schedule. They've got to watch their films, write their reviews, and submit their monster requests by specific deadlines. Vecna's obsession with time isn't about trauma or control. It's about making sure the paperwork gets filed on time. Apparently, the final battle in Season 5 will involve 11 joining the review board and arguing passionately for better horror films, thereby convincing them to stop sending monsters. She'll defeat Vecna not through psychic combat, but through film criticism. The power of a well-reasoned movie review saves Hawkins. I've read a lot of theories while researching this video, but this one might be the most creative in terms of pure what-the-hellness. It's so completely divorced from anything the show has ever suggested that it almost loops back around to being impressive. Someone put thought into this. They developed an entire mythology about interdimensional film criticism. It's absolute nonsense, obviously, but it's entertainingly creative nonsense. This one wins the award for most creative, I suppose, or most bonkers. Probably both. And that, my dear friends, is where we'll end tonight's dive into the wildest corners of Stranger Things Theoryland.